So the coconut effect comes out of a few weeks worth of research. I at first started looking for a magic trick or kind of a sleight of hand, the title of a sleight of hand act that would reflect the economy, the economies that I'm talking about within the work, within this show. And those economies are one of not enough time, overwhelm, not enough money, but a deep desire of to make work and to have joy and to talk about the economy of not having enough, not as something that we're trying to hide, but something that we can celebrate. So I thought I could find some sort of sleight of hand act through the world of magic and close-up magic that would kind of help me. And it was a very long and esoteric line of questioning that I was trying to look for a kind of similarity of tricking the viewer and having joy with very few moves, but none of the titles of the magic acts were that enticing. And so, or they were so specific that I was like, no, this isn't it. So I then started looking in the world of comic books and then Foley arts, so sound effects, and found this idea of the coconut effect, which I thought, oh, this is great, because the word coconut has the word nuts in it, which felt very fitting. But the coconut effect essentially is when Foley artists have to create a synthetic, an unreal sound, because we're all expecting an unreal sound. We've been taught to expect an unreal sound, i.e. the coconuts in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It is a way where we think that the sound of hooves on the ground sound like coconuts, no matter if they're on sand or gravel. So it has to do with the kind of disarmed expectation and the kind of pleasure and perversity of expectation, an expectation that's actually toward something odd that we believe is more real than what is real. And I thought that sat really beautifully along the kind of ideas that I'm working with within these sculptures. I think a lot about the way that theater and magic are relationships between the thing that's happening in the audience and the ways that the magician or the actor or the filmmaker or architect, right, use those expectations to essentially they're a relationship of consent to be dazzled or confused or to be taken on a journey. And then there is this relationship between using language and sound and the many tools that an actor has or a magician has, misdirection or using the voice or action behavior to the mimic to kind of transform someone's understanding about what is real and what's possible. And I think that is what art does as well, that we as artists can use these very simple materials and the kind of formal, the better, the formal tools of design to like color or texture or scale, to also really bewitch or confound in a way that's so exciting that it is a lot like magic. It is a lot like these tools that feel very like what is the term, like they're tools of learning as well, or knowing. So there are also these tools of like knowing what you think and then suddenly coming up against something that is past what you're thinking, and dealing more with like kind of confusion and bewilderment, which are all really important sensations, especially at this time when we're so used to knowing, to practice unknowing or feeling confused or stupid and then to be surprised is such a pleasurable experience, and it's so rare that those things feel pleasurable because they so often feel like obstructions and inconveniences within our lived lives. So I'm trying to talk about it a lot, but to use the delight of theater, the delight of magic, but then the anxiety of those things too. The White Cube Gallery, as I understand it, is almost, it is a neutral frame that takes away all auxiliary information. So it is the perfect place in some ways to view a work of art with all of your attention on that thing, that there's very little ambient light, very little ambient noise. When I walk into a gallery, I am with myself and I am with the work, and I am able to engage in this like, who are you, who am I, and who are we together, which is great. However, the things that I'm thinking about, the auxiliary and the ambient that I'm thinking about within the work and also externally, do have to do a lot with this economy of the home, and also just the economy of like not having a lot of, not having like a luxurious amount of money, right? So the challenge for me, or the invitation, is always, how do I architecturally acknowledge the space, use the space for all of the luxury being that a person's body, wheelchair, stroller can move around this space without the kind of encumbered nature of being in a home. And then that space offers all of these viewpoints, and therefore all of these durational possibilities that sculpture offers itself. So especially for this show, because for the first time I'm working from a wall, I really was thinking a lot about how do I create durational possibilities within this work through sight lines, and how do I, in a very economic way, disrupt this kind of like cavernous, super cool cube in really sneaky ways. So one of the things that I thought about was breaking up this space similarly to like a drawn line, by running kind of a set of cables through it. And at the height that my studio is, so the ceiling of my studio, because I work in a basement, is 7 feet tall. And so it was also this way to kind of bring this reference, to bring the ceiling down so it didn't feel so cathedral-like cavernous. So to bring the height down a little bit, and then also to create to create kind of like sub rooms or annexes within the space, due to the kind of reliquary shrine scale and presence that a lot of these sculptures had. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of create not confessionals, but very almost like private rooms, as gently as I possibly could. And then I realized that I could use a curtain that was very transparent, so that colors could be interrupted, and that you would still have a sense of the whole of the room and all of the work, but there would be obstructed sight lines that would kind of like change the way the work looked through these films or these curtains. And also it would create potentially a kind of like domestic map of doorways and thresholds throughout this work as well, which for me is both kind of evoking a kind of like ritual, or of like looking and thinking and passing through something that seemed just too good a possibility to not try out within this space. So this relationship, the relationship I have to drawing and sculpture is, of course, one of quickness and economy, that it's like incredibly fast to draw. And I want to say that it's really fast to draw for yourself. It's very fast to draw when it is a preparatory work, or it's kind of an iterative work, rather than a drawing that other people will see and judge, right? And so the works that are in this show, some of them are the actual drawings that I did for myself, and some of them, like an actor, are mimics of the original drawing. So because I was thinking about like scale, there was like this way where the drawings themselves were riffing on the act, the personal act itself, of drawing and thinking about sculpture, like thinking about sculpture through drawing. However, the drawings really are helping me try to understand the sculptures that I'm trying to make, or to kind of work out some ideas. And especially for this show, it's interesting that I think only 1 or 2 drawings that were directly related to the things that were made are actually in this show, because I found that because I found that the sculptures themselves, as I built them, needed to be occupied with other objects, like ephemera or things, essentially creating a kind of collaboration, in a formal collaboration, but also just a kind of like attitude collaboration, that they're sometimes interrupting each other and demanding different things, or revealing different things as well. And for me, because I've talked so much about it within my own work, this idea of like the structure of the pietà, or the formal relationship with the pietà, of like a hard thing and a smushy thing, it's really interesting that the structures themselves are also quite squishy. I think there's maybe like one in here that has like very hard rectilinear, like 90-degree angles in it, and the rest are all very soft. However, they are hard, and they act as both frame and support, while also still dominating as like the stars. They're almost like the statues with pigeons that are kind of like coming in and out, right? They themselves have this kind of like stoic presence of stillness, and the softness is not only for me just about the paper, or the coupons or the cloth or rubber bands that are being put on these objects. It's also the softness or the slump has a lot to do with time in my mind, and that these things are kind of migrating, or there's a sense of slowness and quickness within the objects that are occupying these sculptures, and that this vernacular of different moves within these sculptures are one of knowing that you can quickly get that coupon if you remember to get it, or that you can ambivalently shove a pamphlet of some sort in a place, and it will be held there for you to look at and remember later. And as with all kind of iconography, it does have a lot to do with like remembering layers of things, and this idea of remembering things that are both everyday and kind of more spiritual or metaphysical is happening within these works, as I understand them. Yeah. Color is still utterly like confounding to me. We learn about it in preschool. We learn about the primary colors, and that anything is possible with the primary colors. And then of course you realize that this is like a terrible violet, and then you learn more about like the warmth and the coolness of different colors. You learn how to desaturate colors. And for me, the relationship to color is so directed both to sensation, but also to memory. And I think growing up, I grew up in Santa Barbara and Solvang, California, the San Ynez Valley. So in that area, there are a lot of they're hyper realities, and they are like cartoons. They're fiberglass. It's like Disneyland. They're fantasy lands where historical things have been recreated. And I think in growing up in a fantasy or a reconstruction of another time and another era. So Solvang is was founded by Danes, I don't know, in the 1800s, and then in the 1940s. They started creating it as a medieval Danish village, and so as a tourist trap, right? So to bring tourism to the town, they created this very elaborate downtown, which has like windmills and thatched roof homes, and they're all in the style of a medieval Danish village. But the colors are also, they took a lot of liberties with the colors in the 1940s. And I guess it would be in the 50s that they started doing this, probably in relation to Disneyland. But I think that growing up in that time and being so aware of how decor talked about a history, it talked about politics. I think about color and I'm very sensitive to the warmth and coolness of the color and what it references within my own history and within my own visual memory. And you know, I feel like there's like a whole treatise that could be written on like waiting room color palettes, and I use a lot of kind of waiting room or like these interstitial space color palettes, or like early, you know, 1980s McDonald's versus like what they did to Taco Bell's color palette in the 1990s, and I'm constantly quoting or mashing these things up as just another kind of ephemeral way, a nod to like the relationship to decoration and time and the set of, you know, baked in, you know, desires of a certain time, or the politics of a certain time. These sculptures all have about 8 different layers, conservatively, of different colors on them. So underneath these colors, they have changed multiple times. And I do this for 2 reasons. The first is that I'm trying to understand who this, what this form is, because color can impact form so much, and it can play games in certain ways with the form, and with light and shadow, not just as an attitude, but just in relation to like what it can do to like the shape of something and how we perceive it. The other thing that I do in order to get these colors is this layering up of warms and cools and warms and cools and warms and cools. They're very, very thin layers. Means that the color that you see is actually built up. It's like a kind of phenomenon that happens as a result of that layering of warms and cools and warms and cools. So a lot of these colors you can't buy. That the actual surface of the sculpture itself has been built up, and is also a kind of interesting biographical, like, you know, I mean, it's a very short history in terms of the rings of the tree, but that you can see all of the colors that this thing was before, if you just saw it in half and then look. So those colors are sometimes bleeding through or informing what goes on top of it. So it's the only way that I have found currently to get the kind of saturation of hue that I really, really want in something. But it's also how I find, like, who are you as a color? My hope is that the set of things that I do makes space for people to reflect on their own lives, and that the work isn't so dazzling or impressive that people don't feel like they can push up against it or feel like the intention is not to impress. The intention is, oh wow, yeah, oh my gosh, I could start crying. The intention is not to impress. The intention is to exhibit a way of being, and that makes space for other things and other people and other experiences. And that my hope is that people understand this work not to be demonstrated in any kind of like prowess, but that they can say, oh, I like this and I don't like that, that I relate to this and I don't like that. And that the color maybe feels really chirpy or like positive or kind of bewitching, or absolutely like, ooh, I don't like that at all. But that there is some space for people's experience within this. And so when I talk about this desire of sensation, I'm really talking about a way of knowing that we don't think about a lot as being rigorous. But I think I'm trying to demonstrate the kind of rigor that comes from the body, and that comes from lived observations and experiences, that is rigorous in ways that people don't know, and that it is exactly how they know things. It's totally how they know things. It's how they know, a lot, everything. But there's a way that I'm hoping to kind of like reflect and think about learning and knowing, and that there's like a set of like games or magic tricks that I'm trying to use within this work, first and foremost so that I can know or unknow. And I think that I'm really wanting, well, of course, not to be lonely, but also to make some space for people to be with that. I don't know, maybe it's like a childhood experience of like being guileless, and that through a demonstration of a kind of guilelessness that I'm, wanting people to be, to remember that is a kind of tool for knowing and growing as well. And it's like not pretty and it's not comfortable, but there is something quite radical and also deeply disarming about it that is one of survival too. So it's not just about joy or learning or like having fun, but there's also a really sly means of survival that's baked into that an examination of all of these things as well. This is the hope.